Originally, I never would have thought that I would have gotten into fashion when I was younger. I wanted to do something creative, but I didn't know exactly what that was at that point.
When you're making these clothes for that fashion show, how do you kind of prepare for it all?
The first show, it was all just old curtains and old material.
Did you have like any people that, let's say, didn't take you serious?
There were definitely situations where people were like, oh, she's just a student and stuff like that. I've learned that criticism is probably the best thing that I can hear as the designer too.
Yeah.
And then the feeling of actually having your work out on stage, seeing stuff that you're so proud of be seen by other people. There's nothing that really compares to it.
Today, we have a very special guest, Lena Mars, a rising star in the fashion world right here in Arizona. What started as a personal project, a prom dress she never got to wear, quickly ignited a passion for creating unique, eye-catching pieces. Fast forward to today, Lena has made a name for herself in the world of denim fashion, showcasing her designs at exclusive boutique shows and prestigious events like Arizona Fashion Week and New York Fashion Week, all by the age of 20. But she's just getting started. Now she's taking her talents to the next level, making the bold move from ASU to Parsons School of Design in New York City, one of the most prestigious fashion schools in the country. Tune in to hear how she built her brand, carved out her space in the fashion industry, and what's next for this rising fashion icon. Welcome everybody to the first episode of the Hot Shots podcast. Today we have someone super special here in the Arizona fashion community. Her name is Lena Mars. She has been a part of the community just for as long as I have known her, maybe about 3 years, I would say. She's done so many different fashion shows. Her clothing line is super unique. She really focuses on denim and does an expert job at it. You should definitely see her clothing and everything she produces. You guys will definitely see a lot of that in this podcast and on these reels. And I want to introduce you guys to her and talk about her story and how she got to basically where she is today. So I want to introduce you guys to Lena Mars.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here today. Thank you so much for having me.
For sure. So kind of to get into everything, how did you kind of start into fashion? Like, I know you went to ASU and went to school for that. Like, how did you first step into the fashion world?
Yeah, well, my story is kind of interesting, to be honest, because originally I never would have thought that I would have gotten into fashion when I was younger. When I first started sewing, I began during quarantine, actually, because I wanted to start off by making the prom dress that I kind of would have made if school had continued on and I would have been able to go to prom at that time. Yeah, so that's how I kind of started off. And I remember going to just my local Goodwill with my mom because we couldn't go to any of the, big local shops, and we found all of these curtains and tapestries and old tablecloths, and I was like, I feel like I can make something out of this. So that kind of became my quarantine hobby. So I would go home and I would kind of hand sew everything that I could and just kind of experiment and play around with it. And it was just kind of something to keep me busy at first because, again, when quarantine first started, I didn't really have any of the creative outlets that I would have had if school was going on. So
yeah, at least you found something to do during that time. Yeah, because I know that with everybody just being at home, there was those people that kind of took that time to call it lazy and kind of not do anything. And then those others that really took the time and used that time to kind of build whatever they wanted in that time that they had in quarantine. So that was awesome.
It was definitely a little bit difficult at first because I know for me personally, I was involved in sports and different extracurriculars and stuff like that. So it was hard to kind of find something outside of school that I could kind of do on my own because I was so used to group activities like that.
Oh, okay. So were you when you started to sew that first prom dress, did you kind of already have a little bit of experience in sewing, or did you know someone that had experience, or how was it creating that first dress?
Well, my first experience, that was really my first experience sewing. The only prior experience I had was during home economics, for example, where I would kind of learn how to sew a little mitten or something like that for taking food out of the oven, simple things like that. So that was my only prior experience. My grandma definitely sewed, and she had a ton of personal projects, and I think I had one of her old sewing machines at one point. But other than that, I just kind of figured it out as I went along.
Okay. And so when was it when you started from going to those smaller things to creating an actual dress or a piece of clothing?
Yeah, being fully honest, I just kind of went for it. I had no idea what I was doing. What I would do is I would take like individual pieces of fabric, and I had this like little mannequin. It was like a wire mannequin. I had it mainly just for decoration in my room, and I would drape the fabric over the mannequin and just kind of see what looked good and what kind of worked, and I would compare it to dresses that I had in my closet. And from then I just kind of like sewed everything together and cut everything out. It didn't make any sense. Like looking back on it, the construction obviously was not perfect, but I was so just happy trying to make something and trying to create something that I didn't really pay attention to the fact that I wasn't the best at it. I just kind of tried my best.
Yeah, that's always the best way to do it, is to just learn from just doing it, and then seeing once it's actually finished, seeing how you could make it better for the next time. Because I feel like that's where a lot of people always stop, is they never actually finish their project because they maybe get a little into it and then they see a mistake and then they get too caught up in that mistake and don't want to push forward or keep on going with it until they finish that one thing, you know? So I think it's great that you actually, even though you knew that it wasn't going to be perfect, you still finished it to get the outcome you were at least hoping for. So.
Yeah, I think there's a kind of beauty in like the imperfections in the learning process, because I know for me personally, when I go back and I look at my older projects, I love being able to see the like improvement between all of them, because I think with every piece I make, even if I'm not perfect at it or I'm trying something new or a new technique or a different type of fabric, I love just the learning process and seeing how much I'm able to develop my skill set from the very first dress I made to my most recent. There's something special about it.
Yeah. So when was it that you actually got into the Fashion Week part of it? So was that when you were in ASU, or how did you get into the Fashion Weeks?
Yeah, so that was my very first year at ASU. The first fashion show that I was ever a part of, I was part of a club at my school called the Fashion Collective. And we would meet every Wednesday and just like talk about fashion related stuff. And we had this big group chat that talked about fashion related opportunities. And one day, this lady messaged in the group chat, and she talked about wanting to start up a fashion show for her school that I think she was a basketball coach, and she wanted to do a fundraiser for her basketball team. And one of the students at her school came up to her and was talking to her about what like he wanted to accomplish in life. And I remember she told me that he came up to her and said that he really wanted to be a fashion designer, but he had no idea how to get started, and he had no idea really what to do to be able to get his work out there. And she used to be a high fashion model, actually. So she said, you know what, let's put on a fashion show of our own, and let's get a ton of student designers involved. We could have the students, the basketball players, be the models, and we're just going to make this a whole big fundraiser thing. So she started out by messaging a ton of people in the group chats and just like getting to know as many people as possible. And I happened to see the message, and I reached out to her and I was like, hey, I'm a student designer. My work isn't perfect by any means, but I'd really love to be involved with this. I think it sounds like a great opportunity, and I love what you're doing, having a fundraiser for the basketball team. So that's kind of how I first got my start. I just messaged her and I reached out to her. I was like, hey, I want to get involved with this. I have friends that are designers that I could get involved too. And that's kind of how it started. I didn't even have a car at that point, so my mom would just drop me off at the everything like leading up to it. And
so how old were you at that time?
I think 18.
18?
I think I was 18.
Okay. So how did that experience go? Like, did you already have like a thought, like an idea of what kind of designs you were going to make, or did you already have some things already ready, or did you make something brand new for that?
Yeah, honestly, I was really nervous at first. The very first I don't know the right word for it. The very first meeting that we had to kind of prepare for the show, I actually showed up not bringing any of my own work because I was really insecure at first. I felt like my work wasn't really good enough to be on the runway. I was like, I need to create all these new pieces and work really hard to create this entire new collection in the span of like a month or something like that, having very little sewing experience at that point. And I went to the first one and I brought like a few pieces of stuff that from my closet that I thought that I would want to make, and I had them try on the stuff and I saw how it fit. And then I remember getting home that day and looking through my camera roll and looking through all the random pieces that I kind of made during quarantine, and I was like, you know what if I just use these pieces? What if I kind of revamp them a little bit and use those pieces on the runway? Even though they're not perfect, you know, I'm still getting started. I'm a student designer. I don't think anybody expects anything to be perfect.
Yeah.
And that's what I ended up doing. The next meeting that we had, I just brought a ton of my older pieces and saw how they fit the students, and then I altered them to fit the students a little bit better. So.
Wow, that is smart. Yeah, like that is, I don't think I've ever heard a story or someone think of something like that before. That's
And that kind of like saved you a lot of time as well, right? Because you already had like a base of like everything kind of like set out, and then you kind of just improved it if you wanted to, or kind of just that's really dope.
And they wanted me to have like a full 10-piece collection or something like that, and I was like, ooh, 10 pieces, that's intimidating, especially like at that point I had very little sewing experience, so I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna take that leap and use some of my old work and see how it goes from there.
Wow. And then that was because right now you're mostly like focusing on denim, right? Was that denim or what was that?
It wasn't actually. My second show is when I really got started with denim.
Okay.
But the first show, it was all just old curtains and old materials. I mentioned I went to Goodwills and like the local donation centers, and I would get all the curtains and the tapestries and stuff like that.
Okay.
And so all of my first works were all created out of materials like that.
Okay, nice. So after that first experience doing that show, what was the next piece of that, or kind of what direction did you go after that?
Yeah, well, after that first show, I honestly had so much fun working with the students and working with the people, and the feeling that you get after a fashion show when everybody's just happy and like hugging each other and saying congratulations, you know, it is really such an addicting and nice feeling to have to feel part of a community of like-minded people that are just uplifting each other like that.
Yeah.
So I honestly just wanted to get involved wherever I could. I think it was the second fashion show I was ever involved in. It was hosted by Fabric Tempe, and they do this yearly thing where they have designers from all around Arizona create their best upcycled designs using one single material. And that year they were doing denim. I think most years they do denim. And I was like, wow, this sounds like a really cool opportunity. I was living at the dorms at that point, so I called my parents and asked if they could bring my grandma's old sewing machine. So I had that in the little common room that they had in my dorm. And I remember asking people in my dorm group chat, hey, does anyone have any old pairs of pants, old pairs of jeans? And some of my friends would give me their old pairs of jeans that they didn't have, or like had awkward rips or stains or something like that. And I just kind of dissected them all, and I created my very first denim piece out of that.
Yeah, because I think was that first piece. I think we'll go into this once we get into like Arizona Fashion Week.
Yeah.
But so with creating that first piece for Fabric, how was that show compared to the first show that you did? Like, how did you feel creating those pieces?
It was nice because I got the experience of creating something specifically for a show. The very first show that I did, like I mentioned before, a lot of the pieces were pieces that I had created like about a year prior to the event, because it was during quarantine. It was just all the pieces that I was able to kind of create and experiment with. For this one, I was creating with specifically a goal in mind for the showcase. So I sketched out a ton of ideas, and then I just kind of went for it and experimented with the material. It was my first time working with denim, which is a lot more difficult than I thought it would be. I broke so many needles during the process. But
I'd assume.
But the entire process of designing something for a goal, and especially something sustainability oriented, because that's one of my core values as a designer, it was a really great experience, and I learned a lot from it.
Nice.
So just because I really don't have too much knowledge on the fashion. So what's the time frame on something like that? Like the whole like sketching the design part, and then actually like testing the materials, and then kind of like putting it all together. Like what does the time frame for that kind of look like?
Yeah, well, I'd say it kind of differs from designer to designer. I know they like to post the event, I think, a few months before it actually happens, so people have time to gather their materials and like get sewing and everything like that. For me personally, I actually found out about the competition about a week before it happened. So I entered the competition, and then I had to source all my materials and create 2 designs in under the span of a week. And that was definitely a challenge for me. So I would get home from school, and I'd like do all my coursework super quick, and then I'd get immediately to sewing. And I think I had to sew, I think, both pieces within the span of 3 days. So it was a very fast turnaround time for sure.
Wow.
Dang. That is awesome.
So is that normal for most, or is that like just because of the situation? Like,
I think
like for your like the other show that you did where you had like X time before the actual show happened, like is it always gonna be slightly different, or is it just like, I guess
Yeah.
don't really.
I guess it kind of depends for designer to designer. A lot of people prefer to like get everything done way in advance.
Yeah.
It really depends on the show, to be honest, because I definitely have been in situations before where I find out and about an event, and I reach out to somebody like, hey, do you need any designers or anything like that? And it's a very fast turnaround design for making the collection. So it really depends, to be honest.
Okay.
I'd say like, For most shows, it's if I'm creating an entire collection, I would usually like a couple of months in advance because it is difficult to kind of manage everything. But I'd say the majority of time, if it's like little competitions where you're creating like a little individual piece for it, the turnaround time is less than a month.
Okay. Wow. Wow.
Nice. So with all this experience that you've now had with these two shows, how was it when you started getting into the actual fashion weeks? Like Arizona Fashion Week was your first one, right?
Yeah, that was my first major fashion week, and I was so beyond excited to be a part of it. When I first got involved with Arizona Fashion Week, actually, I was reaching out to as many people as possible because I just desperately wanted to get involved in the fashion scene. Like, after the first few shows that I'd participated in and getting my work out there and seeing all the positive reactions from people, I was just really happy to have found something that really makes me happy, and ways that I could kind of create and show my work and just get involved with the community with it. So I would go onto this app called Eventbrite, and I would look up different fashion-related opportunities in the area, and I would just show up to every single event that I could and try to meet people through that. And I remember I was on Instagram, and Joe reached out to me originally from Arizona Fashion Week, and he told me about a gallery opening that they were hosting. And I remember I was so nervous. I showed up, and I brought one of my friends with me, and we were walking around the gallery, and I knew nobody in Arizona Fashion Week at this point. And I was so nervous, but I tried to talk to as many people as possible, and I was trying to figure out who Joe was because I hadn't met him in person before that.
Oh, okay, yeah, just IG.
Yeah.
Just little AVs, all you had, right?
Yeah, so I was walking around the event, and I was trying my best to meet Joe. And then when I finally did meet him at the end of the event, he was talking about Arizona Fashion Week and how they wanted to implement more opportunities for students in Arizona Fashion Week. And I just remember feeling like, this is it. This is so exciting to me. This is an amazing group of people. Everybody I talked to that night was so inspiring, and they had their own stories too. I just felt like I had finally found a sense of community in Arizona, because that's what I was really looking for.
Yeah, and you've like kind of built your steps too throughout your whole time to kind of be kind of comfortable that once you got to that spot, you were kind of ready for it because you had already gone through just the other two shows and kind of gotten a little bit of experience. So now that you were going a little bit bigger shows, now you're a little bit more like confident, I would say. Were you?
Yeah, I was definitely nervous. I think like the first few events I would show up to alone, I knew nobody at events, but I felt like getting out of my comfort zone was probably the best way that I could have gotten introduced to the entire community, because showing up to an event not knowing anybody kind of forces you to get out of your comfort zone and talk to people and learn more about other people in the community and get involved. So I think that was definitely the best way I could have gotten involved with Arizona Fashion Week and with any of the communities, because I was able to meet so many people that way.
Yeah, nice. So how was your experience with Arizona Fashion Week? You did that first year at the X Phoenix. Like, how was that show, and how was just that whole weekend for you?
Yeah, it was amazing. It was my first time designing an entire collection for a show, which was definitely intense. I think I designed everything over the course of around 2 or 3 months for that, because there was an interview process where they were interviewing the student designers, and they selected 3 student designers, 1 for each showcase day. And I remember being so nervous at first because, again, I was pretty new to sewing at that point. I had only been sewing for around a year. And I remember showing up and having all my designs laid out on the table, and they were looking at it and like looking at the construction aspect of it and like the designs and the creativity. And I took photos of models in my work too, so I came up with like a little pamphlet and like showed them my pamphlet and my work, and I had all these photos laid out. And I was so nervous developing the entire collection because I had never gotten reviewed by a panel of people before, but their feedback was really, really helpful. And honestly, I've learned that criticism is probably the best thing that I can hear as a designer too, because I want to learn more about how I can improve myself. So I think that entire process of designing a full collection and then getting to work with the team on developing hair and makeup looks and model selection and everything like that, it was definitely a gigantic leap because I had never done anything like that before. But it was an incredible experience, especially as a young designer too.
Yeah, I know. There's like, since you just mentioned that, like the hair and makeup, like I forgot that's also something like the designer has to all put into perspective. Yeah, like that's crazy. The makeup, the hair. How do you, like when you're making these clothes for that fashion show, how do you kind of prepare for it all? Like, is this also part of what you do in that time that you're creating the clothing, like also creating the look for how you want the models to look, or how are you making that process?
Yeah, I'd have to say that there are so many individual parts of Fashion Week that I did not expect. You know, there are so many individual things. There's a reason that it takes like an entire village to put in a fashion show together because there's so many little details that people wouldn't even think of when organizing a show. And I remember when they sat me down for hair and makeup, I didn't even know that I was allowed to choose that. I was so excited. So I remember I was talking with Gabby and she was telling me about like the different hair and makeup looks that they could have models have. And I remember going on Pinterest and I was like scrolling through like all the different looks and everything like that. And I definitely got off easy because I had a fully blue collection, so I could just have like blue hair and makeup looks, and that definitely made it easier. But it definitely, there were so many individual parts. So the model selection process that was happening while I was creating my pieces, and then I would host little individual fittings as I was creating the pieces too. It was definitely easy because a lot of my pieces are also based around corsets, so everything was adjustable. So that definitely made the whole fitting process easier. But yeah, like I mentioned before, there are so many little parts that most people wouldn't even think of that I didn't even think of.
Wow.
Two questions real quick.
Yeah.
First, what's a corset?
Okay. Gosh, I have some of my pieces in the back of my car. I would have brought one in actually to kind of explain it.
Yeah.
I don't know what a corset is.
So
it's like that thing they put around their waist that like really tight.
Yeah. So like,
okay,
when there's like grommets on the back of like a prom dress, for example, and there's like the lace zigzagging back and forth, and then you pull on the lace and it kind of makes it tighter. It's adjustable in that way because like with a zipper, for example, you can't really like, it's like one size. But if you have like a corset, it's fully adjustable. Pretty much anybody can wear it as long as they fit the front part of it. And
Gotcha. And then second question real quick. So now that you've had that experience, do you kind of design your clothes with an image of the model ahead of time, or is that something that you kind of don't get to choose as much when making the actual design?
Yeah, I'd say that definitely one of the things that I'm learning a lot in school right now, I currently go to Parsons, is the concept of designing for a muse. So a lot of designers choose a person before designing a collection to kind of base their entire collection around, whether it be like their personality, their body type, the way they walk, the way they move, the way they talk, just kind of like their energy. A lot of designers prefer to do that, and ever since like learning about that, I feel like I've been incorporating that a lot into my work too. Yeah, so it really depends for designer to designer, but for me personally, it definitely depends on the piece.
Gotcha. All right, that's dope.
So when you were doing your pieces for Arizona Fashion Week, and you had your models come out, was there a specific order that you had them in, or did they kind of just like how did you order them when they were walking down the runway?
Yeah, I remember that I had a couple of pieces that I was really particular about. Like I had this gigantic denim dress, and I was like, this has to be the last piece. But other than that, I kind of had them all get in a line, and then I kind of mix and match them because I wanted my lineup to kind of reflect the collection. Like I wanted it to go from almost like streetwear to more like the gowns and stuff like that. So I had like a few select pieces where I was like, I want this to go last, I want this to be in the middle, and I want this to be first. But other than that, I just kind of had everybody get in a line, and I was like, okay, I think that would look good if it went first, and then you two switch. And then for most fashion shows, that's kind of what I prefer to do because I've found that if I select a lineup beforehand, then there are always like little individual things that I feel like would look better if people just switched around. So yeah, it really depends.
So which one was your favorite outfit out of that whole collection?
Gosh, that's hard. That is definitely a really difficult question. I'd say that my favorite, just because it is the most memorable, was the finale piece, which was the gigantic denim dress that I created. It was actually the first denim piece that I ever created, so it was special to me in that way. But I think it took around 7 to 8 pairs of jeans, and it was just this massive dress. And I had the model go out and do like a couple of spins on the runway too, so you could really see the entire dress flare out. So I'd say that was probably my favorite piece that I created.
Nice, that's awesome. Did you have a question? Okay, I thought you were.
I
thought you were like thinking. You were like, hold up. Okay, yeah. So after that experience with the Arizona Fashion Week, like that's when I feel like you started doing a lot more. You kind of like ramped up double what you were doing and started doing some other bigger shows. How was the next show that you did? I think was it New York Fashion Week, or did you do anything else before that?
Yeah, I think my next big show was definitely New York Fashion Week, but there was a lot of time in between then. In between doing my very first show and like Arizona Fashion Week and everything like that, I tried to get involved with as many like local fashion shows as possible. So I would do like a lot of fundraiser fashion shows. I did one for Earth Day, for example, and
Okay.
I would just kind of like find these local fashion weeks on like the app that I told you about before and reach out to them and be like, hey, do you need any designers? I'm a local student designer. I'd love to just get involved and like talk to your committee and everything like that. So that's kind of how I was able to get involved with so many fashion shows. And I honestly, I don't know how many I've done, probably around maybe 30 or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would just for most shows I would have like around like 5 pieces or 10 pieces, like somewhere in that little range. And I would just try to get involved with as many as possible. So I was definitely doing like a lot of smaller shows. It got to the point where I was kind of overcommitting to some, and I would do like multiple shows in like a weekend. I think there was one day that I had 2 shows in a day, and at that point I was kind of like, okay, it's getting a little intense. Maybe I should like calm down a little bit and take a rest. So
Yeah, right. Just ramping up. Yeah, because like you started having some momentum. So you're like, yeah, let's keep on going. Let's do it.
Yeah.
So like as you were in that process, just kind of since you were just out of college too, did you have like any people that let's say didn't take you serious because you weren't like an older designer or anything like that? Did you ever have any situations like that?
Yeah, actually, during this entire process, I was still in school. I am still in school.
Oh, okay.
And I think there were definitely situations where people were like, oh, she's just a student and stuff like that, which,
Yeah.
Obviously there is still a lot I have to learn, but it is a little disheartening sometimes to see people not take student designers seriously, because I know so many of my close friends are student designers too, and their work is absolutely phenomenal. Like, it should be seen like around the world. And so it's really sad sometimes to see people not take student designers seriously, which is why I'm so thankful for opportunities like Arizona Fashion Week, for example, because you don't often see opportunities where student designers get to showcase their work on such an incredible platform without
Yeah.
paying thousands and thousands of dollars. So I know that there were definitely situations where people didn't take me seriously or kind of like disregarded me because I am still a student designer. But that makes me even more grateful for the people that are willing to listen to me and to hear out my designs and to hear out other people's designs.
So when it comes to, because you said you're doing a bunch of smaller shows and you got a lot of bigger shows, what's the like, how many like pieces, because you say you do a certain amount of pieces per kind of show, is it like random every time, or is it typically like around a certain amount of like items like for each show, or like how does that exactly work?
It kind of depends, to be honest. Some shows will have like a amount of looks that you have to have to be in the show. So it kind of depended from show to show for me. Some showcases I kind of wanted to show off particular pieces, or if I had created new pieces, I kind of wanted to show those and like highlight those. It definitely depends. Some events will have like a set amount of models. So like when you sign up, they'll give you like the models and say, dress these models. So for that, I usually just bring as many pieces as I can, and I kind of mix and match. The best part about having an entire denim collection is everything kind of goes with everything.
Gotcha. So you're not creating new pieces every single time. Sometimes you're just like mix and matching like some of the older designs you have and kind of like see
definitely.
like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
interesting, interesting.
Yeah,
All right.
creating that many collections would have definitely
Yeah,
been
that's where I was sitting here thinking. I was like, oh, you said 30 plus shows. I'm like, that's a lot of clothes to be making, but that makes it a lot.
A lot
okay.
of mixing and matching for sure, and developing new like individual pieces too. Like I'd, for example, have like a skirt and top and jacket combo, and then for the next show I'd mix and match the skirt and top, and then have like the jacket worn a different way. So there's a lot of different ways that you can portray a single collection.
So how often do you like find yourself or wanting to make new designs or new clothes and stuff like that, or is it usually just kind of the mix and matching kind of thing going on?
Yeah, it really just depends on how much time that I have.
Gotcha.
It's definitely difficult sometimes to manage being a full-time student and also like doing other stuff on the side, kind of like more hobby things. And it gets a little bit difficult sometimes. So I'd say that like pretty much every free second that I would have, I would go from class immediately to the labs and start working on new stuff. And I would do that pretty much every free moment that I had, because I was just so obsessed with creating new looks and new designs. So I really just tried my best to dedicate as much time as possible to it. And yeah, it really depends on the show, to be honest, because if it was a show that I was super excited about or that had a particular theme, I would definitely dedicate more time to creating new looks. And if it was like a show that was more centered around community and showing off artistry, I would reuse some looks, and like sometimes I would get a stylist involved too.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Got it.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So one of the bigger questions I had, so because you said you first started kind of I don't know if you already said it, but do you still go to like Goodwill and stuff like that and pick up like
Oh,
clothes for
absolutely.
like, or
Absolutely.
and then is there like another side where it's like more professional where you kind of go and get different cloths and stuff like that? Like do you kind of like to do a little bit of both, or is it one primarily over the other, or like?
Yeah, so when I was based completely out of Arizona, I grew up in Arizona my whole life. We don't really have big companies that do dead stock fabric, which is basically organizations that bring gigantic bundles of fabric from like higher fashion houses, and it's basically the discarded fabric that they weren't able to create any more pieces out of. So we didn't really have anything like that. But I noticed that the Goodwills have like the most amazing selection of just random fabrics. Like you could go to any curtain or bedsheet section and they will have like the most gorgeous fabric you've ever seen for like $3, you know?
Yeah.
And once I started seeing that, I would go to local Goodwills in like different areas and just kind of explore and find the fabrics that they have. And I was finding so much better quality material than I would have found at any actual sewing store. And it was also more sustainable too, because you're taking things out of the landfill. I remember one of my favorite pieces actually is made out of a bedspread that I found at Goodwill, and it was discounted like down 3 marks or something like that. They had crossed it out and said actually $2.99, and they crossed it out actually $1.99.
It's taking too long to sell.
Yeah, nobody was buying it, and I picked it up and I was like, this is gorgeous. And then I realized down the back there was like this massive, like horrifying tear. Like you couldn't use it as a bedspread. And that kind of broke my heart. I was like, this is such a pretty material. Like, I need to do something with it. And I took it home and I made one of my all-time favorite just ball gown dresses out of it. And after, I think, that first experience, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go to Goodwill and go to donation centers and make all my stuff out of materials that other people wouldn't even think twice about using. So that was kind of cool.
So,
that's
so as
awesome.
a student, where do you keep all that? Like, cause do you keep all your stuff? Like, or is it like a
True.
Like,
Yeah,
like
all of my like designs or like all the fabric.
everything, like
Yeah,
everything you
storage
make, all the
unit.
like,
Oh my
how do you like?
gosh.
Yeah, just like a whole room.
Yeah, I'm
room
just like
full of
trying to
it.
think. I'm like, you have so much
Yeah.
stuff. Like,
Well, I
where
have
does
two
it all
different
go?
answers for that, actually. When I was in Arizona, I moved to New York about a year ago, so I have a different answer for New York. But when I lived in Arizona, I was lucky enough that my actual house, like my parents' house, was about 20 minutes away. So I lived in the student dorms, and I'd keep pretty much everything just jam-packed in my closet. But other stuff and like other sewing stuff, I would just keep in my closet back home. So I had it really easy then. I could just like kind of drive home and drop my stuff off then, or pick up new materials if I needed it. I also had a locker at school that was definitely helpful. But in New York, that is a whole different ball game. I am sharing a dorm, obviously, so there's not a lot of space, and I don't have a locker, so I can't like keep things out of it. I have this like small area under my bed where I keep all of my stuff pretty much when it comes to fabrics. And then I have lovely roommates, which I am so grateful for, and they allow me to, when I was doing New York Fashion Week, for example, they let me keep all of the stuff in the community closet. So half of the closet was like their coats and their going out wear and stuff like that, and then the other half is just jam-packed with denim. So I was definitely lucky that they were nice enough to leave my stuff, to let me leave my stuff there during that time. And then in between breaks, like traveling back to Arizona, I just bring my stuff back and forth.
Okay, got it.
So it was a lot more difficult now that I'm in New York.
That was a good question.
Yeah.
That was something I never even thought about either. What do you do with all that stuff? There's so much stuff.
There's so much stuff you got. Because so my sister did fashion. She's a year older than me, and she did at MCC. She did some stuff. So I kind of had like an idea of like how much material and like the sewing machine and stuff like that you kind of had to have.
Yeah.
So I was just like, that is a lot of stuff.
No, a
you
lot
gotta
of
move
storage
around.
bins, nice roommates. And honestly, you kind of have to figure it out, especially when you have little space. I got it off so easy when I was in Arizona because I could just drive home and put it in my actual closet. But now that I'm in New York, you kind of have to get creative with space. That's what
I
I've
can
learned.
imagine. Yeah. Is it so? Do you have like do you carry X amount of stuff with you that like you're like almost always gonna use, and then you have a lot of stuff like, let's say here in Arizona where you just like know you're not gonna use it, so you have like a bunch of stuff here, and then like so because like I'm assuming like over, you said 30 plus fashion shows or something like that.
Yeah,
the
I've
smaller
only done
ones at
2 in
least.
New York, so.
Okay, so everything that you've done out here in Arizona, you kind of like kept out here in Arizona, or?
Yeah, so most of my looks were in Arizona. I kept pretty much everything. I have this thing where I like always bring at least 1 or 2 looks with me at all times, like no matter where I am, because it's important to have stuff. So when I went out to New York, I had my massive denim trench coat and I had a denim dress, and those were like the 2 pieces that I had with me just in case. And I was so glad that I did bring those actually, because I was lucky enough to work backstage at New York Fashion Week through an organization that was designing for the official like CDFA calendar. So when I was working backstage with them, I had the opportunity to network and meet people, and I connected with this really amazing influencer. And then we ended up doing kind of a collaboration where he wore one of my jackets for a little show. So yeah, it was really exciting, to be honest. So that's why I kind of keep my most important pieces around me at all times. And then my other pieces, I kind of leave up to storage, like how much space that I have.
Got it. So how was that first New York Fashion Week? Like, was it what you were expecting, or like how was it just different from everything else that you've been?
Yeah, well, I was lucky that I had Arizona Fashion Week connections because they were so nice. They knew people out in New York that they knew art hearts that were hosting in New York Fashion Week. So they were like, okay, you and Naomi, who is a member of Arizona Fashion Week, can go and kind of be representatives there. So I was so excited. It was my very first New York Fashion Week show that I ever had the opportunity to attend. I was like overanalyzing my outfit. I wore my own work in the trench coat that I brought up. And I just remember going and trying to talk to as many people as possible and sitting and enjoying the shows. It's not often that I actually just go to shows to watch shows because I don't often get that opportunity. I like kind of being involved backstage and like helping out and volunteering and stuff like that. So it was definitely unique to see it from an audience perspective and kind of sit and watch other designers. And it's really inspiring, to be honest, too. You get to kind of like dissect individual aspects and elements of other people's pieces and take inspiration off of that. So it was a really, really great experience.
Nice.
So you don't get to spend too much time actually watching the show itself?
Usually when I'm designing for shows, you kind of just go backstage and you're managing your own looks. And sometimes I am lucky enough to be able to go up into the audience if there's like an intermission or something like that. But for the most part, if I am designing for a show, it's backstage 100% because there are so many things to manage.
Gotcha. Okay. So what is that kind of like when you're in the behind the scenes kind of thing? Is it like constant like movement, or is it just like there's pauses in between? Like what's the mind like going through like when you're in the back?
Yeah, it's funny, to be honest, because fashion weeks, when they host like a show, it's funny because the shows are usually like, it feels like it goes by in the blink of an eye. But when fashion shows first get started, they usually have a call time that's around like 8 to 10 hours. That's before the actual show starts, and that's how you do like all the hair and makeup, the fittings. Yeah, it's definitely a long day usually. So that's when they have all the fittings. That's when they do the hair and makeup. That's when they check in with the designers about if there like are any alterations or if you need to switch out models or anything like that. So it differs from show to show, but it definitely starts off really slow because everyone just kind of like is arriving and getting everything together, and then up in the hours leading up to the actual show, the pace goes so fast. Like everything that everybody has to manage is like getting everybody in their looks, making sure everybody's in a correct lineup, making sure that all of the designers and the models are accounted for. It speeds up really, really fast leading up to the show. Yeah.
And so how many people are you having to deal with? Are you like orchestrating everything, or is it like you have multiple people doing different things? Like how exactly is the workflow, I guess, in the back? Like how many people are involved and stuff like that?
For New York Fashion Week, for example, it takes a village. There are so many people backstage. There's a lot of volunteers. I was lucky that some of my close friends actually were in New York at the time and were able to help me out backstage. I'm so beyond grateful for them, seriously. So definitely it was a challenge because I barely knew any of my models previously. I think I had 3 models from LMG that I had that were coming up with Arizona Fashion Week. And then other than that, all of the castings were done kind of day of. So I would talk to the lead of the hair and makeup, and then I would say, hey, I need a model with around these measurements. Can you like help me find like a model with these measurements? And they would kind of send people my way, and then we would do a fitting, and if it worked out, perfect. And then if it didn't work out, then they would either try on another piece or go to a different designer. So it was I've never done a show like that before, so it was definitely a good experience to learn how fast paced like a lot of the bigger shows are, because it was a very, very fast turnaround time.
Yeah. So how do you kind of how do you prepare for those days? Like, do you take like the day before, do you kind of like organize everything, or you kind of take like a mental day and just rest, or like how do you kind of prepare for that big day?
Oh my goodness. Leading up to New York Fashion Week, there were not a lot of time for breaks, unfortunately. I like to really try my best to take care of myself, because I noticed that sometimes when you're creative, it's really easy to get burnt out and then feel uninspired once you feel burnt out. So I started putting like a heavy priority on making sure that I was taking enough time for myself and getting enough sleep. But for New York Fashion Week in particular, it was a very fast turnaround time, and it was something that I was like so beyond excited about. I wanted to make it perfect. So I would spend pretty much every night after my classes, I'd go immediately to the labs and I'd stay there until the labs would close. It was funny actually because the security guards actually knew me at one point. I would stay in the labs at my school till around midnight and they'd be like, all right, Lena, time to go. And I'd be like, okay.
You were the only one there?
Yeah, sometimes. It depends. During like finals week and midterms week, the labs will be absolutely packed up until midnight. But during New York Fashion Week, there were definitely times where I was like the only person, like in the labs. Like at midnight, I was the only crazy person. Like,
yeah, just grinding.
That's crazy. You gotta respect that.
Yeah. Right. So leading up to New York Fashion Week, it was just like school, eat, labs, and then like repeating the process over and over and over again. But yeah, I would do it again in a heartbeat. So.
Nice. What is your favorite part out of the whole fashion week? Like, is there a certain piece that you're like, I'm ready for this moment right here?
Yeah, like a certain look or like a certain moment?
Like a certain moment. Like, is it like the hair and makeup part? I know like everything's kind of going super quick and chaotic, but like, is there a piece that like is just your favorite part of it? It could be the end of the night or just the beginning, but is there one that's your favorite?
That's hard, to be honest, because I like every little piece leading up to Fashion Week so much. Especially like getting the opportunity to meet people, to talk with the models, to talk with the organizers of the event, especially talking to the other designers too, because I've met so many incredible people that way, just, you know, being backstage and talking about, oh, you know, like that's your collection, that's so cool, what inspired it. I love meeting people. I say that's one of my favorite parts, getting to talk to people, getting to meet people involved in the organization, like-minded people especially. And I'd say the actual day of the event leading up to the showcases is a lot of fun, definitely chaotic. But again, meeting people, you get really close to people really fast because, you know, you're all working really hard towards a common goal. And then the feeling of actually having your work out on stage and then seeing stuff that you're so proud of kind of be seen by other people. There's nothing that really compares to it. Like seeing something that you've worked so hard on and people in the audience are just like recording on their phones and like clapping and stuff like that, and just it makes me feel like really appreciated that people enjoy my work enough to like document it for themselves. You know, it just makes me happy to see, you know, as an artist.
That's pretty dope. So when it comes to fashion, is there ever, because I know people collaborate and stuff like that every once in a while, but is that a super common thing, or is it primarily more of like a personal kind of like thing when it comes to fashion?
Yeah, I'd say everything in fashion revolves around collaboration. And it's funny because most people view fashion as in like people just trying to, you know, uplift themselves. But I completely disagree with that stigma around the fashion community, because I'd say that every way that I've been able to grow and that I've seen other people grow has been solely based on collaboration. I think that uplifting other student designers and other creatives in the industry, whether it be photographers, hair and makeup, everything is based off of collaboration and creating with the people around you. And I think that is pretty much solely the reason that I was able to grow based off of collaborations, because I would meet models in the area and be like, hey, you know, like we should set up a photo shoot sometime. And then I'd meet a photographer and be like, hey, we should set up a photo shoot sometime, or like different things like that. If it weren't for collaboration within the industry, I
probably wouldn't be as successful.
I wouldn't be able to do a lot of
because there's so many
things.
Like steps.
Yeah.
So what that part's like, totally get that part. That's because there's so many different, like, you know, the makeup, the hair, the et cetera, et cetera. But when it comes to actual like clothes design, is there a lot of collaboration there at all, or is it that part is kind of just like a one lane kind of thing, and then the collaboration comes everywhere else?
Yeah, I'd say it really depends, to be honest, because I have a lot of friends that are student designers too. And when it comes to the actual creation process, like, for example, I would go to Goodwill with some of my friends and we'd choose out fabrics together. So that I'd consider part of the collaboration process. Or like being in the sewing room together. A lot of times actually, like when I'm creating something or my friends will creating something, we'll be like, hey, can you try this on super quick? I just want to see how it fits an actual person rather than a mannequin. So I'd say that's also part of the collaboration process.
There's a lot of different steps to that. No,
so I think just being around people, to answer your question, is like a whole part of the collaboration process. It's nice to be around people that are also like working on their own stuff too, because you get inspired by that. Yeah. And then I've also done like a lot of collaborative photo shoots, for example, with other designers where you kind of mix and match pieces and create out of that. So
interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of collaboration.
I have one quick. Is there a massive difference between like the Arizona Fashion Week and then the New York, or is it kind of the same like thing?
Well, one thing that they definitely warned me about was it was going to be very extremely fast-paced. With Arizona Fashion Week, there are like weeks leading up to it that like have like events and you get to know people and everything like that. You get to select your models, you get to select your like hair and makeup beforehand and your music. There's like a long turnaround time for that.
Yeah.
For New York Fashion Week, everything happens like
Right then
in the
and
blink
there.
of an eye. It feels like, you know.
Okay.
So for Arizona Fashion Week, I had all my models selected like a long time before the event. For New York Fashion Week, it was all day of. Like you meet them the day of, you fit them the day of, you say bye to them the day of. It is a very fast turnaround time.
Did you prefer one or the other? Do you prefer more of like the Arizona kind of thing where it's a lot more like time ahead of it, or did you like the New York thing where it was like right then and there, kind of like on your toes? Like, did you prefer one over the other? Or?
Yeah, I'd say that there were good aspects of both of them. For me personally, one of my biggest things is I love to like get to know the people that I'm working with. I'd love to like know who they are as people and everything like that. So that was definitely something that I really enjoyed about Arizona Fashion Week because it really fosters connections between people and you get to know the people that you're working with. You get to know the hair and makeup team, the models, everything that goes into it, the volunteers. And I loved being able to like meet everybody and talk to everybody individually. So that is something that I really admire about what Arizona Fashion Week's doing because it really inspires the sense of community to be fostered. So that's something I really enjoyed.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. Do you have anything coming up like anytime soon, or is it just going to be kind of like this? I'm not sure how fashion works entirely. So I'm not, is it like, do you always have something like ahead of you where you're kind of doing something, or is it like a lot of waiting time, or like how does that go about?
I'd say as of right now, I do have some stuff planned for November that I'm not sure if I'm allowed to talk about just yet.
Okay.
But I'd say that the turnaround time for a lot of events are very fast paced. Like I didn't know I was doing New York Fashion Week until 3 weeks before New York Fashion Week.
Oh wow.
Truly. I remember as soon as I got the call, Alex called me and he told me about it and I was like, oh my gosh, I only have 2 denim pieces out here. I need to create as much as I can. And I called my parents and I was like, hey, do you know if you could send me some of my older pieces so I could revamp them or like some denim so that I could create out of that?
Yeah.
So that turnaround time was very, very fast. So I've kind of learned that opportunities I just kind of have to go with the flow when it comes to certain situations. You know, I don't have defined plans for certain things, but sometimes things just come up, you know, and I think that's a really exciting thing.
Yeah, that's dope. So do you plan to stay more out in like the New York area, or is it just where, like you say, you just go with the flow and whatever opportunity kind of comes up, you kind of go there, or is it just like more of like a stationary kind of like?
Yeah. So right now I am currently a student. I'm a sophomore at Parsons because I transferred from ASU FITM to Parsons about a year ago.
Okay.
And I'd say that my main focus is definitely on being a student right now. Like I really want to focus on my studies and everything going into classwork. Kind of what I do on the side with my own collection is my own like little personal thing that I want to grow.
Okay.
I do a lot of commissions to kind of be able to like fund buying fabric and materials and stuff like that. So I design like individual garments for people. So that's something that really keeps my collection going and kind of allows me to keep getting materials and experimenting and everything like that. Nice. And I'd say that as of right now with my collection, I just kind of want to focus on growing myself as a designer and expanding my skill set and learning as much as I possibly can. I feel like I'm learning just so much every day from being in New York City and just walking around. There's so many.
Yeah, it's a whole different world out there for fashion.
It's
nuts, crazy.
For sure. So yeah.
So, because I don't like, again, when you got to the opportunity to go into New York, did you feel like you like made it almost in the fashion kind of industry, or are you still kind of feeling like you're barely stepping in? Because again, basic knowledge of fashion, isn't it New York like a quote unquote like the place to be when it comes to fashion and stuff like that? Or
yeah, so my story with New York kind of goes back to when I was first applying for colleges. And when I was applying for college, it was fresh out of COVID, and I'm sure you guys can imagine how crazy New York was fresh out of COVID. So I had applied to all of my like dream schools and everything like that. I applied to ASU, I applied to a ton of different art colleges all over the place. I applied to FIT and Parsons, and at that point in my life, I was so dead set on moving to New York. I was like, I have to go to FIT. This is my dream. This is everything that I've worked towards. And I got into FIT, and I remember sitting down and actually thinking about it and reading all the news reports in New York. And then I got an email from FIT saying that they weren't able to confirm me for student housing. And that was devastating to me because obviously I was 18 years old. I had just graduated high school. I couldn't move to New York and find an apartment. Yeah. I didn't know anybody in New York. So that kind of was like a little damper. I was like, you know what, maybe it isn't meant to be at this point. And I kind of had to learn to just be okay with that and be like, okay, it's okay. You know, if you really believe in yourself and if you really want to, you'll get to New York at one point in your life. So I went to ASU FITM, and I absolutely loved ASU FITM. I learned so much from there. There were so many incredible professors and friends that I was able to make there. I love the facilities that they had too. Those were definitely really helpful. And I remember one day I was talking to one of my professors about how I was committed to FIT and I really wanted to go there originally, but I ended up going to ASU FITM and I really loved being there. And she was like, you know, if this is something, like I saw your eyes light up when you were talking about this. If you want to go to New York, you should go to New York. And I was like, oh. So that night I sat down, reopened the application process, and I was like, you know what, I'm not going to commit to anything. I'm just going to apply to FIT in Parsons and see what happens from there. And so I applied. It was a whole waiting process because, you know, with transfer applications, it's a whole, you know, like getting
Approved
credited. Yeah,
here
credited
and there
and
and
everything
there.
like that. So I just kind of hung out and I was like, you know, I'm not going to have any expectations. And I got scholarships to both of the schools.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was definitely a big decision. I sat down and I looked over everything and I looked over the transfer credits, and I would have had to take an extra year of college at both. But I talked to my parents about it. I was like, this is something that I know that I have to do. I feel like if I don't take this step now to pursue my dreams, then it's going to be really difficult for me to do it later. And I did it. I just committed to it, and I was like, I'm going to take this step, and I'm going to just see where life takes me from there. And that's what happened.
That's crazy. Because you say you started sewing because, like, during the COVID time, right? Because you wanted to do something throughout, like, the downtime or whatever.
Yeah.
So like growing up, you never even had the like thought of like doing the whole design and stuff like that. Like, what kind of like inspired you to kind of like keep going? Because I know you said that earlier, that you were saying that the whole like going to Goodwill and like picking up different fabrics and kind of doing that. When did you like think in your head like, oh, I'm gonna do this for the rest of your life? I guess like when you're like dedicated to this. At this point, doing all these shows and stuff like that. Like, when in your head were you like, yeah, I'm kind of like focused on this like completely?
Well, I'd say that I was surrounded with art my entire life. I was very lucky. My mom is a professional artist, and we grew up having like a public art studio, so I was always surrounded by creativity. But I think a part of me knew that I didn't want to like paint or draw. Even though I loved it, I knew that it probably wasn't something I wanted to pursue as like a full-time career. And I wanted to do something creative, but I didn't know exactly what that was at that point. I was actually, at that point in my life, I was convincing myself that I needed a normal job. I was going to go into pediatrics because I love working with children and I wanted to do something good. So I was really focused on pediatrics. I was like researching medical schools and like different degrees I can get to go on a medical path. And when I first started sewing, when quarantine, it full on took my life an entire U-turn when quarantine happened, because I kind of had to rediscover myself and like be alone for the first time. So as silly as it is, I started a TikTok and I started making sewing videos on TikTok. And I think that is kind of what kept me sane during quarantine, because I was able to talk to people online. And a lot of the people that were on my TikTok were like younger kids who were also like inside during quarantine, had nothing else to do. And they would message me and be like, oh my God, this is so cool. I want to get into sewing. And I was like, you should, you know, we should all like pick something up and try a new hobby. And sometimes I would do little live streams, and I honestly was a part of a really good community on TikTok for a while. I had a lot of people that were just sending me positive reactions to my work and being like, oh my gosh, this is really cool. At one point, I think I passed 10,000 followers, which is pretty cool too. I don't have the counts anymore, but it was just a really cool point in my life where I was able to foster kind of like a small community and be like, hey, you know, let's do arts and crafts together. Let's create together. Let's learn together. I'm still learning. I want to learn and see how other people are able to learn. So it was just like a point in my life where I was kind of experimenting and meeting people and like seeing the positive reactions. And then that kind of is what encouraged me to start, you know, doing stuff on my own. And then once quarantine was lifted, I'd go back to school and I would like wear my work to school, and people would be like, oh my God, you sewed that? That's so cool. And I'd be like, yeah, I made it. So that was kind of cool. And that dress that I mentioned before, actually, the ball gown that had like the big rip on it that I found at Goodwill, I wore that for my senior photos. And it was just like this massive dress. It was kind of obnoxious, to be honest, like a Victorian dress. And I was like in the line for taking school photos, and everyone was dressed like up nice. And then you just see me in this like massive ball gown. But just like my friends and peers' reactions, and then my family was really supportive, and they were like, yeah, this is something that you're really passionate about. And I was like, I think this is something I want to pursue. I think this is something I'm passionate about. I want to see where this is. I want to see where it takes me. So that's kind of how it started.
That's awesome.
So how long would you say you've done this like seriously, I guess?
Yeah, I'd say my first show was in March of, I think it was 2022 or 2023.
Okay.
I'd say that is when I first started taking it seriously, and when I was like, you know what, I'm going to put everything that I have into this. I'm going to put everything that I am into my work, and I'm going to try my best every single day and with every single piece that I create, and I'm going to see where it takes me from there. So I'd say around that time is when I was like, I need to go all in on this. I know that it's obviously a very competitive industry. I wanted to just do the best I could with the materials that I had, and that is kind of like what propelled me forward, just trying my best.
Gotcha. Is there a certain point that you want to hit in the whole fashion thing, or is it just kind of like you said, go with the flow, or is there like some like a goal in mind where you're like, I want to be on this show or whatever?
Yeah.
She's already on the show. She's on the Hot
No,
Shots
no,
show.
I get it.
Yeah, well, I'd say that it's difficult to manage a fashion brand. It's difficult to create any artistic product that is able to be mass marketable, especially in a way that's ethical and sustainable. And I'd say that's a way that a lot of smaller sustainable fashion brands is a struggle that we have. To kind of find a way to ethically produce clothing in a way that's sustainable and like fits our core values. And you know, for me, it's a lot of like upcycling, so you can't really like mass market upcycling unless it's like specific commissions. As of right now, everything is kind of like funded through different commissions and everything like that. My New York Fashion Week collection was funded off of a commission that I got through my school. I'd say that once I get to a point where I'm able to create, or I have like, I can only hope, a team that can help me create in the future, a brand that is sustainable and ethical and highlights all of my core values as a fashion designer, then I'll feel confident. I'll feel really good about it, because that is my goal. I want to be able to produce work that I am proud of and that is sustainable and ethical, and I want to do it in a way that reflects everything that I want my brand to reflect, if that kind of makes sense.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's really dope. So you say like a lot of things like the ethical side of like the fashion stuff like that. So is there a lot of parts of the fashion side that are kind of like sucky? Like, is there things that are like kind of have to do it, but it kind of sucks kind of thing? Or
Yeah, that's the hard part about the fashion industry, to be honest. There are a lot of ethical concerns, especially when it comes to outsourcing materials and also like purchasing materials, because every garment that everybody wears is made by a human. There are no machine-made garments. Everything that everybody is wearing is 100% made by people. So it gets difficult to kind of navigate that and figure out, you know, like, are these outsourcing labs and like materials, like the people who are making this being treated fairly? It's definitely a difficult thing to manage within fashion, and it's a thing that a lot of brands definitely struggle with. And it's a thing that a lot of people are working to correct. There's a lot of political and fashion acts that are working to correct things like that, because it definitely is a big concern within the fashion industry. For the longest time, I felt really guilty about wanting to get involved with fashion, because I know that there are a lot of ethical concerns. But somebody once sat me down and said, you know, like, the new generation needs to be the change of that. The new generation needs to be the people that are finding ways to outsource ethically and to treat people fairly and to find materials that aren't damaging the planet. And that's kind of what I want my brand to be surrounded by. Like, everything that I create right now, my entire denim collection, for example, it was out of denim that people would not be able to use. So all old materials that had like rips in awkward areas, or like stains, or just stuff that people normally wouldn't buy from the thrift shop or from the bins too. I take a lot of stuff from the bins. I want to focus on taking stuff out of the landfill rather than producing more things that will go into the landfill, if that kind of makes sense. So yeah, that's one of my biggest things.
Yeah, and it's awesome seeing that like on your Instagram too, like all the designs that you make. Like, that's one thing that like I feel is my favorite thing about you, is like the content that you're able to make with your clothing, because you make great content. So like just being able to see all your clothing and like the best highlight, and like just now knowing like how you want to produce your clothing and all that, it's just, yeah, it's super cool just seeing how you're just doing it all.
Thank you. Yeah, I like making my silly little reels on the topic, kind of like how I created stuff and how people are reacting to it. It just makes me happy to be able to share my work and to have really supportive people that are also like kind of cheering me on, and I like cheering other people on too. You know, it's a good community.
So what is like your next, like now, like what is your next steps kind of moving forward, like from today on? Like what is your goals?
Yeah, my goal is to kind of just keep learning and developing myself as a designer, to do more things. My next collection, actually, I haven't talked about this a lot, but I want it to be made out of dead stock materials that aren't just limited to denim. So I want to do a collection that's kind of focused on dead stock materials, but not limited to a single material like my previous collections. I want to experiment and learn as much as I possibly can about just other ethical materials and different ways I can produce clothing without it being like a huge concern to the environment.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's my biggest thing next.
That's dope.
Nice. Then I don't know if you want to mention it, but you did say that you have a fashion show later today.
I do, yes.
Can you talk about that a little bit? Like,
Yeah,
what is
for
that one
sure.
about?
So it's ran by two sisters, and they honestly are so sweet. I met them, over 2 years ago now, I think, and they hosted a Barbie show that was in like a little speakeasy kind of area, and they had like a lot of local designers, and it was just like a really fun opportunity to be a part of. And they reached out to me and they were like, hey, are you going to be in Arizona during this time? We're hosting a show. And I was like, actually, yeah, I'm in Arizona for a week, and that is one of the days that I'm going to be here.
Sick.
So I was like, I have my New York Fashion Week collection. I could just fly out and pack it all in this carry-on suitcase, and then and I'm going to do the show with them. Their organization is Glamazon, and they are a really, really sweet organization. So I'm really excited to be a part of it and like meet all the other designers that are also going to be a part of it, and the models and just everyone. I love doing it.
Nice. Do you know like people that are already going to be a part of it?
I do, yes. They sent me a list of models beforehand, and I actually recognized like a lot of the people that were going to be there. And I also, before I was a part of the show, I saw a lot of people like posting, "You've been accepted as a model. It's a Glamazon show." And I was like,
sick.
"Oh, this is so cool! Like so many people I know are getting involved in this." And then they asked me to be a part of it, and I was like, "Of course I'll be a part of it." I love being involved in the community and seeing people again. I miss it out in Arizona for sure.
Yeah, right. So how's kind of life getting accustomed to being in New York? Like now that you're just like the Arizona era is over per se. I don't know if you'll be back, but like just that new life in New York, how's that been?
Yeah, well, I'd say my Arizona era, I hopefully will never be over just because there's so many people that I love and admire here. This is where I got started. I feel like I know a lot of the fashion community, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to collaborate and like know a lot of people that want to collaborate and also grow their portfolios too.
Yeah.
So I always will have, my heart will always be in Arizona. But learning and developing myself and just learning how to restart in an area that's so foreign to me has been really exciting, because moving out to New York, again, I had family up there, like extended family, but I didn't really know anybody. Like I didn't know anybody who was going to the school. I didn't know, I never met my roommates before. I'd never met anyone in my classes before. And especially being a transfer student, it was difficult because you're going into an environment where everybody already knows each other. And then you kind of have to puzzle piece yourself in and be like, hey, like, do you want to go get coffee later? Do you want to meet later? Do you want to collaborate later? And it's kind of like rebuilding yourself,
Yeah.
And I'd say that was something that I struggled with for a little while, but you kind of just have to walk in there and meet people and be nice and see where it takes you. And I was able to make a lot of good friends this year, which I'm thankful for. And
Do you think you would have been as like comfortable in that situation if you would have gotten accepted into Parkinson's that very first time? Or do you think like it was kind of destined that you kind of had all those experiences before getting there?
Yeah. I'd say that it was definitely helpful having prior experience before going to Parsons, because I was able to kind of like learn who I was as a designer and develop myself before stepping into an environment that is very, very competitive, where people are like constantly like working to develop themselves and get like the best internships and stuff like that. It's competitive in New York. So it was definitely helpful to kind of have that basis and learn more about myself as a designer and like learn different methods and sewing techniques and everything like that before I went to Parsons, because it kind of gave me like a basis. And I also feel like I grew a lot as a person. I definitely grew a lot as a person in those 2 years that I went to ASU. So it was definitely extremely helpful to have kind of like a basis before moving on.
Awesome. So we're about to just wrap up right now. That was your story on just how you do everything is so just amazing. Do you have anything kind of to follow up?
No, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, so
I had one question, but I'll get back to it. I don't remember it right now, so just give me a second.
All right.
So where can people find you? Like social media handles or like website? Where can people find you and your designs?
Sure. Well, the majority of my work right now is based off of Instagram. I do have like LinkedIn and a website and everything like that, but I'd say the best way to either get in contact with me or to collaborate or anything like that would be through Instagram. So my Instagram is lenamars.design, which is LENAMARS haute.design. And that is definitely the best way to get in contact with me if you want to collaborate or anything like that, or if you're looking for a custom piece. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Nope.
Well, thank you guys for watching these first episode of the Hot Shots podcast with the one and only Lena Mars. She has been through so much here in Arizona and now in New York Fashion Week. So we're super excited to see where her next journey takes her, and hopefully in the next couple months have another follow-up podcast and talk about everything she's learned from then on. But thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. It was interesting to learn about the whole fashion a little more. So
Right.
appreciate it.
Thank you.